The crystal chandelier above trembled as 8-year-old Ethan Corleone's piercing scream shattered the refined atmosphere of Le Chateau Noir, Manhattan's most exclusive restaurant. His small fists hammered against the pristine white tablecloth, while his father, tech billionaire Vincent Corleone, sat frozen in his Italian leather chair, watching his empire of control crumble in real time. Hey there, beautiful souls. Welcome back to my channel, where we dive into stories that remind us what truly matters in this crazy world. I hope you're having an amazing day wherever you're watching from. Drop a comment and let me know what city or country you're tuning in from. And if you haven't hit that subscribe button yet, you're missing out on these incredible true stories of human connection. Trust me, you'll want to be part of this community that believes in the power of kindness. Now, let me tell you what happened next, because what this humble waitress did will absolutely blow your mind. The screaming intensified. Ethan's body went rigid, his back arching as overstimulation crashed over him like a tidal wave. Every eye in the restaurant turned toward their table, faces twisted with disgust and annoyance. Vincent's hands trembled as he reached for his son, but Ethan recoiled violently, his autism making human touch feel like fire against his skin. "Get that brat out of here," hissed an elderly woman in pearls. Her champagne glass paused mid-sip. Vincent's throat tightened. He'd conquered boardrooms, destroyed competitors, built a tech empire worth $12 billion. But here, watching his beautiful boy suffer while strangers judged them both, he felt more powerless than he'd ever felt in his life. The maitre d' approached with barely concealed fury. "Mr. Corleone, perhaps it would be best if—" That's when she appeared. A young woman with kind eyes and flour-dusted apron moved through the chaos like she belonged there. While everyone else backed away from Ethan's meltdown, she walked straight toward the storm. What happened next would change everything. Vincent thought he knew about strength, about value, and about the kind of person who truly deserves to inherit the earth. This is just the beginning of something beautiful. Are you ready? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe because this story is about to get incredible. Vincent Corleone had built his fortune on reading people their weaknesses, their tells, their breaking points. But as he watched this waitress approach his son, something in her movements told a different story than he was used to reading. Her name tag read Sophia, and unlike every other staff member who'd maintained a professional distance from the chaos, she moved with purpose. Not the hurried, annoyed purpose of someone trying to solve a problem quickly, but the steady, knowing purpose of someone who'd been here before. Vincent's jaw clenched as he studied her. 24, maybe 25. Auburn hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. Her uniform wasn't the crisp designer version the other servers wore. This was clearly a hand-me-down, slightly faded at the edges. Her shoes were practical, worn from long shifts. Everything about her screamed working class, the kind of person who usually faded into the background of his world. But there was something else. The way she tilted her head as she listened to Ethan's distressed sounds, like she was hearing a language others couldn't understand. Her eyes held a depth that reminded Vincent of his late wife, Elena, that same intuitive wisdom that had once made him believe in magic. "Sir," she said quietly, her voice somehow cutting through Ethan's screams without competing with them. "May I?" Hesitated. Every instinct told him to protect his son from more judgment, more failure. But something about the way she asked, not seeking permission to fix a problem, but asking to help a child, made him nod. The restaurant's other patrons had formed a hostile audience. Vincent recognized most of them: Senator Richardson and his wife, the Vanderbilt twins, old money families who'd never worked a day in their lives but somehow felt entitled to judge his parenting. Their whispers cut deeper than any business rival's attacks ever had. "Typical new money," someone muttered. "No class, no consideration." Vincent's free hand curled into a fist. He'd grown up in the Bronx, the son of Italian immigrants who'd worked themselves to death in factories. Every dollar of his billions had been earned through sleepless nights and ruthless determination. But none of that mattered when his 8-year-old son was drowning in sensory overload, and he couldn't throw money at this problem to make it disappear. Ethan's autism had been both Vincent's greatest challenge and his most profound teacher. Since Alina's death from cancer 3 years ago, it had been just the two of them against a world that didn't understand. Vincent had hired the best therapists, bought every specialized toy and tool, converted an entire wing of their penthouse into a sensory-friendly space. But here, in public, all his resources meant nothing. The waitress Sophia knelt beside Ethan's chair, staying just outside his personal space. She didn't try to touch him or force eye contact. Instead, she did something Vincent had never seen a stranger do. She began to hum, not loudly, not intrusively, a soft, melodic tune that seemed to wrap around Ethan's screams like a gentle blanket. Vincent's breath caught. It was Claire de Lune, Elena's favorite song, the one she'd hummed to Ethan every night before bed. How could this stranger possibly know? As Sophia hummed, she slowly reached into her apron pocket and pulled out something that made Vincent's heart skip. A small, smooth stone, not unlike the worry stones Elena used to carry. Sophia began rolling it between her fingers in a rhythmic pattern, creating a subtle, repetitive motion that Ethan could see in his peripheral vision. The screaming began to soften. "That's it, sweetheart," Sophia whispered, her voice like honey over gravel. "You're doing so good. Sometimes the world gets too loud, doesn't it?" Vincent felt tears he'd been holding back for months threatening to spill. When was the last time someone had spoken to his son with such understanding, such respect? But watching Sophia work her quiet magic, Vincent found himself wondering who this woman really was, and why helping his son seemed to come as naturally to her as breathing. What he was about to discover would shake everything he thought he knew about the people who truly mattered in this world. Drop a comment and tell me, have you ever witnessed someone show unexpected kindness to a child having a hard time? And if this story is touching your heart, hit that subscribe button, because Sophia's background is about to reveal something absolutely beautiful. Ethan's breathing slowly synchronized with Sophia's gentle humming. His rigid posture began to soften, and for the first time in 20 agonizing minutes, Vincent saw his son's shoulders relax. The restaurant's hostile whispers faded into background noise as something extraordinary unfolded before his eyes. "My brother Tommy taught me this," Sophia whispered to Ethan, still maintaining her respectful distance while rolling the smooth stone between her fingers. "He gets overwhelmed too, especially when there are too many sounds and smells all mixed up." Together, Vincent's breath caught. She understood. This wasn't pity or professional training. This was a lived experience. Sophia reached into her other pocket and pulled out a pair of noise-canceling headphones, clearly well-used and personal. "Would these help?" she asked Ethan directly, not his father. "They're my brother's favorite color, blue, like the ocean when it's really calm." Ethan's screaming stopped entirely. His eyes, usually darting everywhere during a meltdown, focused on the headphones. Slowly, with the careful deliberation Vincent knew meant his son was processing, Ethan nodded. The transformation was miraculous. As soon as the headphones settled over his ears, Ethan's entire body language changed. His hands were unclenched. His breathing deepened. He looked up at Sophia with the first genuine eye contact Vincent had seen him make with a stranger in months. "Better?" Sophia asked, her lips moving clearly so Ethan could read them. Ethan nodded again, then did something that made Vincent's world tilt on its axis. His son reached out and gently touched Sophia's hand, voluntary physical contact that he rarely initiated even with his own father. The restaurant had gone silent, but now it was a different kind of silence. The hostile energy had shifted into something Vincent couldn't quite name. Awe, maybe, or shame. "How did you?" Vincent's voice came out rougher than he intended. Sophia looked up at him, and for a moment their eyes locked. Vincent felt something he hadn't experienced since Elena's death. A connection with another human being that transcended his wealth, his power, his carefully constructed walls. "My little brother Tommy is 14 now," Sophia said simply. "He's autistic too. I've been his primary caregiver since our parents died 4 years ago." Her voice held no self-pity, just matter-of-fact strength. You learn to see the world differently when someone you love experiences it differently. Vincent felt like he'd been struck by lightning. This woman, this waitress, he'd initially dismissed as part of the background scenery, had been fighting the same battles he faced every day. But she'd done it without billions of dollars, without teams of specialists, without any of the advantages he took for granted. "Thank you," he whispered, meaning it more than any words he'd ever spoken in any boardroom. Sophia smiled, and Vincent noticed for the first time how beautiful she was. Not the polished, artificial beauty of the socialites he usually encountered, but something real and warm that seemed to light up from within. "We take care of each other," she said simply. "That's what people do." But as she started to stand, preparing to return to her duties, Vincent made a decision that would change both their lives forever. Wait. The word came out more commanding than he intended, and he saw Sophia's walls go up slightly. He softened his tone, remembering that his usual billionaire authority wouldn't work here. "Please, I'd like to know more, about how you helped him, about your brother." Sophia hesitated, glancing around the restaurant where other tables were waiting, where her manager was probably wondering why she'd spent so long away from her assigned section. That's when Vincent noticed the man in the expensive suit striding toward them with obvious displeasure. The restaurant manager, his face tight with barely controlled fury at a waitress who dared to interrupt the evening of his most important patron. "Miss Packer," the manager's voice cut through the moment like a blade. "You're needed in the kitchen, immediately." Vincent saw something flicker across Sophia's face, fear, resignation, the look of someone who couldn't afford to lose this job. In that instant, he realized that while she'd just performed a miracle for his son, she was probably about to be fired for it. The injustice of it hit him like a physical blow. Here was someone with more genuine value than anyone else in this room, and she was about to be punished for showing kindness. That's when Vincent Corleone, billionaire and destroyer of obstacles, made the decision that would turn a chance encounter into something neither of them could have imagined. This is where everything changes, beautiful people. Have you ever seen someone punished for doing the right thing? Let me know in the comments, and if you're invested in seeing justice for Sophia, smash that subscribe button because it is going to be intense. Actually, Vincent's voice cut through the manager's authority like a blade through silk. "Miss Packer won't be going anywhere just yet." The manager, whose nameplate read Henderson, turned toward Vincent with the kind of obsequious smile reserved for billionaires. "Mr. Corleone, I do apologize for this disruption. I'll have her removed immediately, and—" "You'll have her what?" Vincent stood slowly, his 6-foot frame unfolding with the kind of controlled power that had intimidated Fortune 500 CEOs. But when he glanced at Sophia, who was still kneeling beside Ethan's chair, his voice softened. "Miss Packer just performed a miracle. The last thing she should be is removed." Sophia looked between them, her hand still resting gently on Ethan's shoulder. Vincent could see the conflict in her eyes, gratitude warring with the practical reality that she needed this job. Her worn uniform and practical shoes told a story of someone living paycheck to paycheck, someone who couldn't afford to have a billionaire fight her battles. "Mr. Corleone," she said quietly, "it's okay. I should get back to work." "No." Vincent's word came out harder than he intended, and he saw Sophia flinch slightly. He forced himself to breathe, to remember that his usual corporate tactics wouldn't work with someone who had no reason to trust wealthy men who threw their weight around. "I mean, please, stay, just for a moment." Henderson's smile grew more strained. "Sir, we have protocols. Staff isn't supposed to interact with guests beyond taking orders and agility. Your staff member just did something your protocols never could have achieved." Vincent gestured to Ethan, who was now calmly coloring on the paper placemat Sophia had given him, the noise-canceling headphones still snug over his ears. "She turned a disaster into a miracle. If your protocols don't account for basic human decency, maybe your protocols are wrong." Around them, the other diners were openly staring now. Vincent caught sight of Senator Richardson leaning toward his wife, whispering something with obvious displeasure. The Vanderbilt twins were filming with their phones, probably for their social media accounts, ready to turn his family's vulnerable moment into entertainment. Vincent felt his familiar rage building, the same fury that had driven him to crush every business rival who'd ever underestimated the poor kid from the Bronx. But then he looked at Sophia again, saw how she was watching Ethan with such genuine care, and something in his chest loosened. "Tell me about your brother," he said to her, ignoring Henderson entirely. Sophia glanced nervously at her manager, then back at Vincent. "Tommy's amazing," she said softly. "He's brilliant. He can solve math problems in his head that would take me an hour with a calculator. But the world doesn't always know how to see his brilliance." Vincent nodded, understanding flooding through him. "Ethan's the same way. He remembers everything, every conversation, every face, every detail. But in moments like this," he gestured helplessly at the restaurant around them. "The world gets too loud," Sophia finished. "Too fast, too overwhelming. Tommy says it's like trying to listen to a symphony when every instrument is playing a different song." Something shifted in Vincent's chest. When was the last time someone had understood, really understood, what his daily life was like? Not the business challenges or the financial pressures but the heartbreak of watching your child struggle in a world that wasn't built for him. "Where does Tommy go to school?" Vincent asked. Sophia's face tightened almost imperceptibly. We're homeschooling right now. The public schools in our neighborhood aren't equipped for his needs, and the private programs are." She didn't finish, but Vincent understood. Money. Everything came back to money. "Sir," Henderson interrupted, his patience clearly wearing thin, "I really must insist. How much do you pay her?" Vincent asked suddenly. Henderson blinked. "I beg your pardon?" "Miss Packer, how much do you pay her per hour?" "Mr. Corleone, I hardly think employee wages are." $12.50, Sophia said quietly. "Plus tips." Vincent did the math automatically. $12.50 an hour, maybe 30 hours a week if she was lucky, in one of the most expensive cities in the world. She was supporting herself and a disabled brother on roughly $16,000 a year before tips. The injustice of it hit him like a physical blow. This woman, who had more practical wisdom about autism than any of the $100 an hour specialists he'd hired, was making less in a year than he spent on wine. "I'd like to offer you a job," Vincent said suddenly, the words coming out before he'd fully thought them through. Sophia's eyes widened. Henderson's mouth fell open. Even Ethan looked up from his coloring, sensing the shift in energy around him. "Mr. Corleone," Sophia said carefully, "that's very kind, but—" "Not charity," Vincent said quickly, recognizing the pride in her voice, the same fierce independence he'd carried out of the Bronx. "A real job. You understand something about my son that no one else does. You have skills that money can't buy." Sophia stood slowly, and Vincent saw something complicated flicker across her face. Hope, fear, suspicion, all warring for dominance. "What kind of job?" she asked. That's when Vincent realized he was about to offer this woman, this stranger who'd appeared in his life 20 minutes ago, something he'd never offered anyone else. A real partnership in the most important job he'd ever had. Being Ethan's father. Y'all, can you feel the tension building? Vincent's about to make an offer that will change everything. But will Sophia trust him? Drop your thoughts in the comments and hit subscribe, because it is going to deliver the twist that nobody sees coming. "I need someone who understands Ethan," Vincent said, his voice carrying the weight of 3 years of desperate searching. "Not a nanny, not a therapist, not another specialist with degrees and theories. I need someone who sees him the way you just did, someone who sees him as a person, not a problem to be solved." Sophia's hands trembled slightly as she processed his words. Around them, the restaurant had become a theater, with every patron pretending not to watch while hanging on every word. "Mr. Corleone," she said carefully, "I appreciate what you're trying to do, but I don't have any formal training. I'm not qualified to. You're the most qualified person I've ever met." Vincent's interruption was gentle but firm. "In 5 minutes, you did what teams of experts couldn't do in 3 years. You saw my son." Henderson cleared his throat, loudly. "Mr. Corleone, surely you can discuss employment matters at a more appropriate time. Actually," a cold voice cut through the conversation, "I think we should discuss what's really happening here." Everyone turned. Senator Richardson had risen from his table and was approaching with the kind of predatory confidence that Vincent recognized from Washington power plays. "Charles," Vincent said evenly, "something on your mind?" Senator Richardson's smile was razor sharp. "Just curious about this touching scene. Very convenient, isn't it? A pretty young waitress swooping in to save the day, and suddenly she's being offered a job by one of the city's most eligible bachelors? Vincent felt ice form in his veins. What exactly are you implying? Oh, nothing sordid, Richardson said with false brightness. Just wondering if our viewers at home might find it interesting that Vincent Corleone, who's been quite vocal about his company's commitment to hiring based on merit, seems ready to hand out positions based on, what would we call it, emotional manipulation. The senator's words hit the room like a bomb. Vincent saw Sophia's face go white and saw the exact moment she understood what Richardson was suggesting, that she'd orchestrated this somehow, that helping Ethan had been a calculated move to seduce a billionaire. Tommy's not a prop, Sophia whispered, her voice barely audible. My brother isn't part of some scheme. But Richardson wasn't finished. Tell me, Miss Packer, Sophia said, her chin lifting with dignity that made Vincent's chest tighten. Miss Packer, how long have you been working at this particular restaurant? How long have you known that Mr. Corleone dines here regularly? Sophia looked stricken. I've been here 6 months, but I never. 6 months, Richardson repeated meaningfully. Plenty of time to research the habits of wealthy clientele, to learn about their personal struggles, their vulnerabilities. Vincent watched in horror as doubt crept into the faces around them. The Vanderbilt twins were recording everything, their phones capturing Sophia's humiliation for their social media followers. Other diners whispered behind their hands, the narrative shifting from miracle to manipulation in real time. That's enough. Vincent's voice carried the full weight of his authority, but Richardson had drawn blood and wasn't backing down. I'm simply suggesting that a man of your intelligence would want to verify someone's background before making impulsive decisions. After all, how well do you really know Miss Packer? What's her real story? Sophia's breathing had become shallow, her hands shaking. Vincent could see her retreating into herself, the walls going up as she prepared for the kind of judgment and suspicion she'd probably faced her entire life. That's when Vincent made a choice that surprised even him. You want to know her real story? He pulled out his phone, fingers moving rapidly across the screen. Give me 30 seconds. Vincent Corleone hadn't built a $12 billion empire by being naive. He had investigators, background check services, resources that could uncover anyone's history in minutes. If Sophia Packer was running some elaborate con, he'd know it before Richardson finished his next sentence. His phone buzzed with incoming data. Vincent's eyes scanned rapidly. Sophia Marie Packer, age 24. Parents died in a car accident 4 years ago. Legal guardian to younger brother Thomas, age 14, diagnosed autistic. Current address, a studio apartment in Queens that rented for $800 a month. No criminal record, no debt beyond student loans for the nursing degree she'd been forced to, abandoned when her parents died. Vincent's throat tightened as he read further. Emergency room visits for Tommy when his autism-related anxiety had triggered panic attacks. Late rent notices. A second job cleaning offices at night. Sophia had been quietly heroic for 4 years, and nobody had noticed. But the next line made Vincent's world stop spinning entirely. Medical records showed Tommy's last doctor visit was at Mount Sinai Hospital. The attending physician's notes included a recommendation for a specific therapy program, one that Vincent recognized because he'd researched it for Ethan, but couldn't access it. The waiting list was 3 years long. But according to Tommy's file, Sophia had called every week for 4 years, asking if there were any cancellations, any openings, any way to get her brother the help he needed. The intake coordinator's notes painted a picture of a young woman who never gave up, never stopped advocating, never stopped believing her brother deserved the best care possible. Vincent looked up from his phone, his eyes meeting Sophia's across the charged silence of the restaurant. In that moment, he realized something that changed everything. She wasn't trying to use him. He needed to save her. Hold up, beautiful souls. Did not see that coming, did we? Richardson just flipped this whole situation upside down, but Vincent's about to make a move that will shock everyone. Smash that subscribe button if you're Team Sophia, because what comes next is going to break your heart before it puts it back together. You're right, Senator, Vincent said quietly, his voice cutting through the restaurant's tense silence. I should know more about Miss Packer's background. Sophia's face crumpled. Vincent watched her dreams die in real time as she realized that even the one person who'd seemed different was going to doubt her. "Vincent," she whispered, using his first name for the first time, and the sound of it broke something inside his chest. "I swear to you, I never... Tommy is real. He's not some story I made up. He's my whole world." "Of course he is," Vincent said gently, but Richardson's poison had already spread through the room like wildfire. The other diners were nodding knowingly, their expressions shifting from curiosity to disgust. The Vanderbilt twins were typing frantically on their phones, probably crafting social media posts about the scheming waitress who'd tried to seduce a billionaire. Henderson stepped forward, his manager's authority suddenly emboldened by the senator's implications. "Miss Packer, I think it's best if you collect your things. Your employment here is terminated, effective immediately." "Wait," Sophia said desperately. "Please, I need this job. Tommy's therapy sessions cost." "I'm sure you'll figure something out," Henderson said coldly. "You seem quite resourceful." Vincent watched Sophia's world collapse in real time. Her face went white as she realized what was happening. Not only was she losing the job offer that could have changed her life, but she was being fired from the only income she had. In one of the most expensive cities in the world, with a disabled brother depending on her, she was about to be left with nothing. "Mr. Corleone," she turned to him one last time, her voice barely a whisper. "Whatever you're thinking, whatever you believe about me, just please don't let this affect how you see Tommy or Ethan. They deserve better than what happened here tonight." Something in her words, the fact that even in her darkest moment, she was still thinking about the children, made Vincent's chest feel like it was caving in. But before he could speak, Senator Richardson delivered the killing blow. "Actually, Miss Packer, there's something else we should discuss." His smile was predatory. "My wife and I frequent this restaurant. We've seen you here many times over the past 6 months. Interesting that you always seem to be assigned to tables near where Mr. Corleone sits. Almost like you were positioning yourself. That's not because I don't control the seating assignments." "Of course not," Richardson said smoothly. "But it is curious, and given your family's financial struggles, which I'm sure a man of Mr. Corleone's resources could easily verify, well, desperation makes people do desperate things." Sophia's face went from white to gray. Vincent could see her breathing becoming labored, panic setting in as she realized how thoroughly she'd been trapped. Every kindness she'd shown, every genuine moment of connection, was being reframed as calculation. "I can't," she whispered, looking around the restaurant full of hostile faces. "I can't breathe." That's when Ethan, who'd been quietly coloring throughout the entire confrontation, suddenly stood up. He pulled off the noise-canceling headphones and walked directly to Sophia, ignoring every person in the restaurant except her. "Sophia sad," he said clearly, his voice carrying the pure truth that only children possess, like Tommy when people don't understand. The restaurant fell silent. Ethan rarely spoke to strangers, and never with such clarity. He reached up and touched Sophia's hand, the same gentle gesture she'd shown him. "Not pretend," Ethan continued, looking directly at Senator Richardson, with the kind of unwavering honesty that cuts through adult lies like a laser. "Sophia help, like Tommy helped her." Vincent felt his heart stop. His son, who struggled with social cues, who rarely picked up on emotional undercurrents, had seen through Richardson's manipulation instantly. Ethan knew real kindness when he experienced it, but the damage was already done. Sophia was gathering her things, her hands shaking as she untied her apron. She knelt down to Ethan's level one last time. "You're going to be okay, sweetheart," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Your daddy loves you so much, and you're going to do amazing things." She pressed the worry stone into Ethan's palm. "Keep this, okay? For when the world gets too loud." Vincent watched the most genuinely good person he'd met in years walk toward the restaurant's exit, her shoulders squared with dignity, even as her world crumbled around her. In 30 seconds, she'd be gone forever, taking with her the first real hope he'd felt since Elena died. The worst part? A small, poisonous voice in his head whispered that maybe Richardson was right. Maybe he'd been naive. Maybe wealthy, powerful men like him were always targets for people desperate enough to try anything. But as Sophia reached the restaurant door, Vincent looked down at his beautiful, honest, perceptive son and saw tears streaming down Ethan's face. "Daddy," Ethan whispered, his voice breaking with the kind of pure emotion that couldn't be faked or manipulated. "Sophie's heart hurts, like when Mommy went away." That's when Vincent realized he was about to make the biggest mistake of his life. He was about to let the best thing that had happened to him and Ethan walk out that door because he'd been too cowardly to trust his own instincts. I'm actually crying writing this part. Beautiful souls. Sophia's walking away, and Vincent's about to lose everything that matters. But don't you dare click away, because next is where our hero finally finds his courage. Hit subscribe if you believe in second chances, because this story is about to get beautiful. Vincent Corleone had built an empire by trusting data over emotion, logic over instinct. But watching his son's tears fall for a woman who'd shown them both more genuine kindness in 20 minutes than they'd received in 3 years, every calculation in his brilliant mind led to the same conclusion. He was an idiot. "Ethan," Vincent whispered, kneeling down to his son's level, "you really think Sophia was helping us? Not pretending?" Ethan nodded emphatically, wiping his nose on his sleeve. "Tommy is real. Sophie is real. Like us real." The simplicity of it hit Vincent like lightning. His 8-year-old son, who struggled to understand social deception and manipulation, had cut through Richardson's poison with laser precision. If Sophia had been acting, Ethan, who processed the world differently than neurotypical people, would have sensed the disconnect immediately. Vincent stood slowly, his mind racing. He pulled out his phone again, but this time he wasn't running background checks. He was making a call that would change everything. "Marcus," he said when his head of security answered, "I need you to do something for me right now. There's a young woman leaving Le Chateau Noir. She has auburn hair, wearing a waitress uniform. Don't let her get on the subway. Offer her a ride home, but don't tell her it's from me. Just keep her safe until I can fix this." He ended the call and turned to face the restaurant full of people who just watched him make the worst mistake of his life. "Ladies and gentlemen," Vincent's voice carried the authority that had built his empire, but now it carried something else. The raw honesty of a man who'd finally remembered what actually mattered. "You've just witnessed something extraordinary. A young woman with more courage, wisdom, and genuine goodness than anyone in this room just had her character assassinated by a politician who wouldn't recognize real virtue if it saved his own son." Senator Richardson's face darkened. "Vincent, surely you're not going to. I'm going to tell you exactly what I found when I looked into Sophia Packer's background." Vincent's voice rose, carrying to every corner of the restaurant. 4 years ago, her parents died in a car accident. She was 20 years old, in her second year of nursing school. She could have put her autistic brother in state care and continued her education. Instead, she dropped out, became his legal guardian, and has been working multiple jobs ever since to keep them together. The restaurant had gone dead silent. Vincent could see doubt creeping into some faces, shame into others. She lives in a studio apartment in Queens that costs $800 a month, which, for those of you who've forgotten what regular people's lives look like, is more than half her income. She works here during the day and cleans offices at night. She's never missed a rent payment, never missed one of her brother's therapy appointments, and has spent 4 years calling Mount Sinai every single week, asking if there's an opening in their autism program. Vincent's voice grew stronger as he spoke, passion replacing calculation. "This woman has been quietly heroic for 4 years, and the moment she shows kindness to my son, the moment she demonstrates exactly the kind of character that money can't buy, we assume she must be running some kind of con, because that's the only way our cynical minds can process genuine goodness." He turned to look directly at Senator Richardson. "You want to know what's manipulative, Charles? Using your political skills to destroy someone's reputation because you're uncomfortable with the fact that a waitress showed more wisdom in 5 minutes than you've demonstrated in your entire career." Richardson's face had gone red. "How dare you? How dare I what? Defend someone who can't defend herself? How dare I choose to believe in human decency over political cynicism?" Vincent felt something he hadn't experienced since Elena's death, the courage to fight for something that mattered more than money or power. He looked around the room at all the faces that had watched Sophia's humiliation with satisfaction. I've spent 3 years surrounding myself with experts, specialists, people with degrees and credentials and theories about how to help my son. Not one of them could do what Sophia did tonight. Not one of them saw Ethan the way she saw him, as a complete person worthy of respect and understanding. Vincent's voice broke slightly. My wife Elena used to say that you can measure a person's true character by how they treat someone who can't do anything for them. Sophia didn't know who I was when she helped Ethan. She didn't help him to get something from me. She helped him because that's who she is. Ethan tugged on Vincent's jacket. "Daddy, get Sophie back." The pure hope in his son's voice gave Vincent the final push he needed. He'd spent 3 years being careful, being protective, keeping his distance from people who might hurt them. But tonight, he'd learned that the biggest threat to his son's happiness wasn't strangers who might take advantage of them. It was his own fear of trusting the right people. Vincent looked down at his son, his beautiful, honest, brave son, and made the decision that would define the rest of their lives. Yes, buddy, Daddy's going to get Sophie back. But first, he was going to do something he should have done the moment Richardson opened his poisonous mouth. He was going to show everyone in this restaurant what it looked like when someone chose love over fear. Yes! Vincent finally found his backbone. But can he catch Sophia before she disappears forever? Drop a fire emoji in the comments if you're ready for this man to fight for what matters, and smash that subscribe button, because what comes next is going to be epic. Vincent swept Ethan into his arms and strode toward the restaurant exit, but Henderson stepped into his path with desperate authority. "Mr. Corleone, please, if there's been a misunderstanding." "The only misunderstanding," Vincent said coldly, "is that I ever thought a place that treats people like Sophia the way you did tonight was worthy of my business." He pushed past Henderson and burst through the restaurant doors into the Manhattan evening. His eyes frantically scanned the street until he spotted Sophia, standing beside a black town car, looking confused as Marcus, his head of security, gestured toward the open door. "Sophie?" Ethan's voice cut through the street noise. Sophia spun around, her eyes widening as she saw them rushing toward her. Vincent could see the wariness in her posture, the way she'd armored herself against more hurt. "Mr. Corleone," she said carefully, "your driver says you sent him, but I don't understand." "I'm an idiot," Vincent said without preamble, still slightly out of breath from running. "The biggest, most cowardly idiot who ever lived." Sophia blinked, clearly not expecting that opening. "I let a bitter politician make me doubt what I knew in my heart was true," Vincent continued, setting Ethan down but staying close to his son. "I watched you help my child with more wisdom and compassion than I've seen in 3 years, and instead of trusting my instincts, I let fear make me weak." "Vincent, please," he interrupted, using her first name the way she'd used his. "Let me finish before I lose my courage again." The street around them faded away, the honking cars, the distant restaurant noise, even Marcus's protective presence. Vincent felt like he was standing in a bubble with the two people who mattered most. "When Elena was dying," Vincent said quietly, "she made me promise something. She said, 'Don't let fear make you so careful that you forget how to live. Don't let protecting Ethan turn into isolating him.' Tonight, I almost broke that promise because I was too scared to believe that someone could care about us without wanting something in return." Sophia's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't speak. "You want to know what convinced me?" Vincent pulled out his phone and showed her the screen. "I didn't just run a background check. I called Mount Sinai. I spoke to Dr. Patricia Reeves, the intake coordinator for the autism program." Sophia's face went white. What did she tell you?" "She told me about a young woman who calls every Friday at exactly 2 p.m. asking if there are any cancellations for her brother. She told me that in 4 years you've never missed a single call, never been rude, never been pushy, just hopeful, every single week for 4 years." Vincent's voice broke slightly. "She said you're the most devoted sister she's ever encountered. The way you talk about Tommy makes everyone in the office believe in the power of family." Tears were streaming down Sophia's face now. He deserves the best care. He deserves every chance to. Dr. Reeves also told me something else, Vincent interrupted gently. There's been a cancellation. Someone dropped out of the program last week. Tommy can start Monday if he wants to. Sophia's legs gave out. She sank against the town car, her hands covering her face as 4 years of hope and exhaustion finally overwhelmed her. How? She whispered. The waiting list is meaningless when you have the right connections, Vincent said simply. But that's not the important part. The important part is that I want to make you an offer. A real one this time, with no audience, no pressure, no politicians trying to poison the moment. He knelt down so he was at her eye level, the way she'd done with Ethan. I don't need a nanny or a therapist or another expert with theories. I need a partner. Someone who understands that Ethan isn't a problem to be solved, but a brilliant child who experiences the world differently. Someone who can help me create the kind of life Elena would have wanted for him. Vincent reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. This is a job offer, not charity, not some romantic gesture, a real position with my foundation. We're launching a new initiative to create autism-friendly spaces and programs throughout the city. I need someone to run it, someone who understands the challenges from the inside. Sophia took the paper with shaking hands. Vincent watched her eyes widen as she read the salary enough to move Tommy into a better apartment, to quit her night job, to actually build a life instead of just surviving one. Vincent, she whispered, this is too much. You don't know me well enough to— I know you well enough, Vincent said firmly. I know that when you saw my son struggling, your first instinct was to help, not to judge. I know that you've spent 4 years fighting for your brother with no support and no resources, and you never gave up. I know that you carry worry stones in your pocket and noise-canceling headphones in case someone needs them. He stood slowly, offering her his hand. Most importantly, I know that Ethan trusts you, and Ethan is the best judge of character I've ever met. Sophia looked at Vincent's outstretched hand, then at Ethan, who was watching her with hopeful eyes. Daddy's right, Ethan said solemnly. You're a good person, like Mommy was a good person. The simple honesty of it, the comparison to the wife Vincent had loved more than life itself, broke the last of Sophia's defenses. She took his hand and let him pull her to her feet. Okay, she whispered. Yes, I'd like to try. Vincent felt something he hadn't experienced since Elena's death, the sensation of a family beginning to heal, to grow, to become something new and beautiful. But the best part was watching Ethan's face light up as he realized Sophia wasn't going away. Sophie, stay? He asked hopefully. I stay, she confirmed, and Vincent heard in those 2 words a promise that would change all their lives. Behind them, through the restaurant's windows, Vincent could see the other diners watching in amazement. Some looked ashamed, others curious. Senator Richardson stood at the window with a thunderous expression, probably already planning his revenge for being publicly humiliated. Vincent didn't care about any of it. For the first time in 3 years, he was exactly where he belonged, standing on a New York street with his son and someone who might just help them build the future Elena had dreamed of. I'm not crying. You're crying. Vincent finally did the right thing and Sophia said yes. But wait until you see how this beautiful story ends. Hit that subscribe button if this moment gives you all the feels, because the conclusion is going to leave you believing in miracles again. 6 months later, Vincent stood in the doorway of his penthouse's transformed living room, watching something that still took his breath away every single day. Sophia sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by a dozen children of various ages, all somewhere on the autism spectrum. Tommy, now 15 and thriving in his program at Mount Sinai, was demonstrating to the younger kids how to use the sensory corner they'd designed together. Ethan moved freely among the group, no longer the isolated child who'd melted down in restaurants, but a confident boy who'd found his tribe. The weighted blanket helps when everything feels too fast, Ethan was explaining to a shy 6-year-old girl. And Sophie says it's okay to need quiet time. Vincent smiled, remembering how terrified he'd been 6 months ago that Sophia would somehow change their dynamic, invade their carefully constructed safe space. Instead, she'd helped him create something he'd never imagined possible, A home that wasn't just a refuge from the world, but a place where the world could visit and find acceptance. "Daddy!" Ethan called out, spotting him in the doorway. "Come see what Tommy built." Vincent walked into the controlled chaos, stepping carefully around the elaborate marble run that Tommy had constructed across half the living room. The boy looked up at him with the kind of shy smile that had become increasingly common as his confidence grew. "It's based on the Fibonacci sequence," Tommy explained, his voice stronger than it had been 6 months ago. "Each section has mathematical properties that create predictable sounds." "It's incredible," Vincent said, meaning it. In 6 months, he'd watched Tommy transform from a scared, overwhelmed teenager into a young man discovering his own brilliance. The private tutoring, the specialized programs, the environment where his unique mind was celebrated rather than corrected, it had unleashed potential that had been trapped for years. But more than that, Vincent had watched Sophia bloom. The tired, stressed woman who'd worked multiple jobs just to survive had become the confident director of the Corleone Foundation's Autism Initiative. Her programs were already being replicated in 12 cities. Her gentle, intuitive approach to creating inclusive spaces had revolutionized how businesses and schools thought about accessibility. Mr. Vincent called Maria, the shy 6-year-old, "Look what I made." Vincent knelt down to examine her art project, a painting that was mostly purple swirls with carefully placed dots of yellow. To untrained eyes, it might have looked random, but Vincent had learned to see differently. "Tell me about it," he said, giving her his full attention. "It's the feeling when the world gets quiet again," Maria explained solemnly, "after it's been too loud for too long." Vincent felt his throat tighten. 6 months ago, he wouldn't have understood what she meant. Now, thanks to Sophia's patient teaching and his growing friendship with this community of families, he saw the world through different eyes. "It's beautiful," he said honestly. "The yellow dots are perfect." Maria beamed and ran back to show Sophia, who was helping 2 boys work through a disagreement about sharing the noise-canceling headphones, the same ones she'd offered Ethan that first night. Vincent's phone buzzed with a text message. He glanced at it and smiled. "Reservation confirmed for Le Chateau Noir, 7 p.m. tonight. Private dining room as requested. Marcus." Vincent looked across the room at Sophia, who was now reading aloud to the group from a book about a dragon who was different from all the other dragons. Her voice was warm and animated, drawing even the most reluctant listeners into the story. 6 months ago, she'd walked out of that restaurant in tears, humiliated and jobless. Tonight, she'd walk back in as his partner in the foundation, in raising their boys, and if everything went according to plan, in life. The engagement ring in his jacket pocket felt warm against his chest. "Attention, everyone," Vincent called out. "I hate to break up this amazing afternoon, but some of you have families waiting at home." A chorus of disappointed groans rose from the children, but they began the well-practiced routine of gathering their belongings. Vincent watched Sophia help each child with their coats, making sure everyone had their sensory tools and comfort items. "Tommy," Vincent said as the teenager carefully disassembled his marble run, "you're still coming to dinner tonight, right?" Tommy nodded, though he looked nervous. "Is it fancy? I don't know if I'm good at fancy." "You're good at being yourself," Sophia said, appearing at her brother's side. "That's all anyone should ever have to be." Vincent felt that familiar warmth in his chest as he watched them together. The bond between Sophia and Tommy had only grown stronger as their circumstances improved, but it had also evolved. Tommy was becoming more independent, more confident in his own abilities. Sophia was learning to step back and let him try new things, even when her protective instincts wanted to shield him from every possible disappointment. It had been beautiful to witness, and it had taught Vincent valuable lessons about letting Ethan grow as well. As the last family left, Vincent found himself alone with Sophia, Ethan, and Tommy in the suddenly quiet penthouse. "So," Sophia said, flopping onto the couch with the kind of exhausted satisfaction that comes from a day well spent. 12 kids, 0 meltdowns, and Tommy's marble run didn't destroy any furniture. I call that a win." "Sophie," Ethan said, climbing onto the couch beside her, "can we do art therapy again next week?" "Of course, sweetheart. What do you want to paint?" "A picture of us," Ethan said simply. Our family. Vincent felt his heart stop. Ethan had never used that word family to describe anyone beyond Vincent himself since Elena died. The casual way he included Sophia and Tommy, the assumption that they belonged together, was everything Vincent had hoped for but had been afraid to expect. Sophia's eyes met Vincent's across the room, and he saw his own emotions reflected there, the joy, gratitude, and something that looked a lot like forever. "I'd love to paint our family," Sophia said softly. 3 hours later, Vincent sat across from Sophia in the private dining room at Le Chateau Noir, watching her try not to laugh as Tommy carefully examined each piece of silverware to determine its proper use, while Ethan explained the fancy people rules he'd observed during their previous visits. The same restaurant that had witnessed their lowest moment was now hosting what Vincent hoped would be one of their highest. Henderson, the manager who'd fired Sophia 6 months ago, had greeted them with the kind of obsequious attention that Vincent had learned to ignore. But what mattered was watching Sophia hold her head high as she walked through the dining room where she'd once been humiliated, now confident in her own worth and surrounded by people who loved her. "This is weird," Tommy announced, cutting his steak with scientific precision. "Good, weird, but weird. 6 months ago, Sophie was serving food here. Now she's eating it." "Life's full of plot twists," Sophia said, smiling at her brother. "The trick is learning to enjoy the good ones." "Is this a good plot twist?" Ethan asked seriously. "The best," Vincent said, his hand finding Sophia's across the table. "The absolute best." As dessert arrived, Vincent felt the ring box pressing against his ribs and knew it was time. 6 months ago, he'd made one of the worst mistakes of his life in this restaurant. Tonight, he was going to ask the woman who'd saved his family to make their unconventional arrangement permanent. "Sophia," he began, his voice steadier than he'd expected. She looked up at him, probably expecting him to say something about the foundation or their plans for next week's program expansion. Instead, Vincent stood up, pulled out the ring box, and got down on one knee right there in the private dining room where it had all begun. "6 months ago," he said, his voice carrying clearly in the quiet room, "you walked into our lives and changed everything. Not because you were trying to, not because you wanted something from us, but because that's who you are, someone who sees people who are struggling and steps in to help." Sophia's hands flew to cover her mouth, her eyes wide with shock. "You've made us a family," Vincent continued. "Not just Ethan and me, but all of us together. You've shown us what it means to build a life based on love instead of fear, acceptance instead of judgment." Tommy was grinning widely, clearly in on the plan. Ethan was bouncing in his chair with excitement. "I love you," Vincent said simply. "I love your courage, your wisdom, your stubborn refusal to give up on people. I love the way you see the world, the way you've taught me to see it. I love that you fight for the people you care about, especially when they can't fight for themselves." He opened the ring box, revealing the engagement ring he'd chosen, not the biggest or most expensive diamond he could afford, but one that reminded him of her, elegant, strong, and absolutely perfect in its unique beauty. "Will you marry me? Will you be Ethan's stepmom, officially? Will you help me build the kind of family Alina would have loved, where everyone belongs exactly as they are?" The silence stretched for what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds. Then Sophia started crying the good kind of tears that come with overwhelming joy. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, yes, yes." As Vincent slipped the ring onto her finger, Ethan cheered loud enough to probably be heard in the main dining room, and Tommy applauded with the kind of enthusiastic precision that made everyone laugh. Vincent kissed his fiancée in the same restaurant where a cynical politician had tried to destroy her reputation, where she'd been fired for showing kindness, where he'd almost made the worst mistake of his life. But sometimes, the places where you fall apart are also the places where you learn to put yourself back together better than before, stronger than you imagined possible, and surrounded by the people who truly matter. 6 months later, at their wedding in the same penthouse where they now hosted dozens of families every week, Vincent would tell their guests that the best decisions aren't always logical, but they're always loving. And love, as it turned out, was the one investment that always paid dividends. "Beautiful souls, I hope this story touched your heart the way it touched mine writing it. This is what happens when we choose love over fear, when we see people for who they really are, and when we remember that the most important victories aren't measured in dollars, but in the lives we change and the families we build. If this story moved you, please smash that subscribe button and drop a comment telling me about a time someone showed you unexpected kindness. Share this video with someone who needs to remember that there are still good people in the world doing beautiful things. Until next time, keep believing in miracles because sometimes they wear aprons and work the night shift, and sometimes they're disguised as the scariest moments of our lives. Love you all.